Welcome to the Euro Express with me, your host, Kevin Turley. On this show, we climb aboard the Euro Express to visit different European locations where we talk to people living there about their lives and their faith. It's as if we're hurtling through Europe in the dining compartment of the Orient Express with good food and even better conversation. Today, we head to Holland, where we meet Fr Elias Leyds, founder of Ewtn in the Low Countries. And with him, we pick up Ivo Bender, Ewtn's main man in Central Europe, coming to us live from Poland. So, all aboard the Euro Express. So, Fr Elias and Ivo, welcome to the Euro Express. Fr Elias, where exactly in Holland are you?
Well, I'm quite in the center, actually, in a place that is well known in this region, not in the world. It's called Geldermalsen. Don't be alarmed, I don't suffer from any virus, but that's the way we pronounce it in Dutch, Geldermalsen.
Wonderful. And Ivo, where exactly in Poland are you today?
Well, it's slightly easier to pronounce. It's the city of Lublin, so it's like Dublin, but with an L in front of it.
Now, Lublin has a very famous university, right?
Well, it has the Catholic University of Lublin, which during the communist times, was the only Catholic university between Berlin and Beijing. So, and that's also the place where a certain Professor Karol Wojtyła held the chair of ethics for many years.
Wow. Amazing. I wonder what he would make of all of this. John Paul II. What do you think he'd make of this coronavirus?
I think he was a man of reason and common sense. So he would have sounded accordingly. And I think he would give the world a lot of encouragement, and also probably, as he was in reason and faith, he would probably advise us to listen to and find out what actual research and science tells us, rather than follow, shall we say, sensationalized versions of the story. And another thing that is important from his legacy, he was also very honest with the media, with journalists, and he was always admonishing them, or us, in fact, to be the bearers of truth rather than sensation. So I think, we can only speculate, but I think he would remain himself under these circumstances.
Now, gentlemen, on our journey on this Euro Express, it's as if we're hurtling through the night in a very good dining compartment of an intercontinental train with good conversation and even better wine. But it's interesting having you both, because we've got different aspects of Europe represented here, and yet we're all dealing with the same crisis, something which certainly since the Second World War we haven't had an experience of in this sort of way, in which the whole of Europe is engulfed with this. Fr Elias, in Holland at the moment, what is the kind of general atmosphere around this whole COVID-19 business?
Well, I think it's important to distinguish between the secular crisis throughout the centuries, those crises are always the same. It's about money, it's about land, it's about bickering about who has killed whom. But of course, I think, how do you recognize a spiritual struggle, a real challenge that God wants us to deal with, is that those crises are always different. The secular crises are always the same. Like the sins that you hear in the confessional, they tend to be extremely monotonous. It's always the same things. Whereas things that come from God and that put us, if you like, in a spiritual struggle, they're always new. They're always original. And I think that's the first thing we must say. It's not just a crisis as we have not seen since any war or any moment in history, but I think it's a completely new struggle that we have to face. How we are dealing with it, well, it's difficult to say. Every country, of course, has a different background, has different circumstances. But I think the most important thing is it's a completely new crisis, and we must be encouraged not by the people in the past who solved similar problems, but by the people who solved very different problems, but had courage that was not from here. I mean, we are not being threatened by animals that want to eat us in the arena. We are not threatened by the Huns from the east or the English from the west. I don't know. I don't think you're threatening us very much now. So it is something new that we have to question science. We have to question about everything that we take for granted, that we believe in, that seems to give us a certain certainty in our life. Now, I think the main topic really is how far science must be believed, and to what extent we must stay free, you know. And what is freedom anyway? So I think there is a very deep spiritual crisis going on, and we should not just stop at the symptoms.
Ivo, you travel across Europe. I know in your role, Central Europe is you cover the whole of Central Europe for Ewtn in your capacity. You've traveled to a number of countries, I guess, in recent times. Is that correct?
Well, yes. In the past 2 months, I had two sort of round trip tours around Central Europe. So from Poland to the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Croatia, Slovenia, Austria, Italy. So yeah, quite a catalogue of countries that I visited. Yeah.
And would you say that there's the same what Fr Elias is describing there? Is that what you're picking up in all of those countries? That same sort of almost existential crisis?
No, not at all. Not at all. I think. For a number of reasons, we tend to live in our little bubbles, and one type of those bubbles is a national bubble. It's a question of language, custom, and actual borders. So in several countries, I saw pretty much nothing that would remind me of this coronavirus story from back in late March. So in the Czech Republic, life goes on as normal.
Really?
Same I noticed in Romania on the western borders of Romania. That's where I was in the sort of part of western Transylvania. Quite the reverse in Italy. On the Italian border, they were actually disinfecting the front of the bus, and then wiping it and then putting disinfectant. And I was thinking, the effectiveness of this is pretty much as much to be appreciated as rattling of a rattle of a witch doctor. Probably that's actually more effective in terms of automatic possible outcomes. So yeah, when it boils down to certain rituals or certain behaviors that are mandated by the police, like in Italy, where if you sit down in a bar, you can have your mask off, but if you stand up, you have to put it up.
Wow.
Back on your face. And I discussed that with a bartender in a hotel bar, and he was, so I basically said, well, carabinieri. And, yeah. So if this whole thing becomes a ritual, you sort of have to question yourself, why? And why do we do this? And why are we told to do this? Why is it safe to sit down but not to stand up? Why do we have to wipe the windshield of a bus with disinfectants, so other things, waiting for us to jump at us. I mean, what would a biologist say to that, or a microbiologist? I mean, actually, my mom is a microbiologist, so I have some, shall we say, first-hand knowledge of these things. And but really, your O-level biology probably would tell you that that's not how viruses operate. And then if you actually look into the research, so basically, are the rituals the answer, and is the rattling the answer? I don't know. Probably not.
But it's interesting how different countries are using different things, is what you're saying, Ivo, to ward off this sort of evil. What's the situation in Holland at the moment, Father Elias? I mean, are you all masked up? Are you all walking around?
In public transport, yes, but in public life or in the streets, hardly. And there are incredible differences, which, it's hard to believe. I go to my sports club where sweat is flying all over the place and lack of oxygen because of the human effort. I mean, it's a very intense sport, and the environment is, it's just completely different than public transport, but there are no precautions. The trainer just has to say publicly that if you feel sick or if you have a cold, it's better not to come to training, but life goes on.
Yeah.
Yesterday, in public transport, you wear this diaper on your face. It's obligatory, although there's very few people traveling by train at the moment, so when somebody's at 2 or 3 meters distance, why do you have to wear this? And then yesterday I was at the funeral of Cardinal Simonis, and that was just a completely new rite. I mean, it's the Novissimus Ordo, if you like. You need to cleanse your hands before receiving the communion on your hand.
Yeah.
Priests have this kind of thing that I used to wear when I had to, with how do you say that?
Welders.
A welder's cap.
Yeah.
People were sitting at enormous distance, and the irony of the whole thing was that we had a Dutch. Government was represented by a minister who was, of course, obeying to the rules, but who has caused an enormous scandal because he has married recently, and on the pictures of the marriage, it is absolutely public that he doesn't care at all about any of the rules that he has imposed himself.
Oh dear.
So this man sat in front of everybody in the church. So it was absurd. It was surreal. And so it depends very much on where you go,
right,
and where people are vulnerable to interference by the government.
Okay, well, look, we could sit here and talk about coronavirus for another month.
Yes.
Let's talk about something else, because Ivo, before we came on air, you were telling me about some of the First of all, Father Elias, you're starting Ewtn in the lowlands, which is Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, that sort of, and
everything that's Dutch, and that used to be called the lower countries, which actually includes French-speaking and German-speaking regions too. But we are ambitious. Right.
So that's beginning there, which is wonderful news. And then, Ivo, you told me some good news about a new development in Central Europe.
Well, yes, we are now beginning to develop a station in Romania.
Wow.
So that's the newest one on our list. That's why I was in the town of Oradea, or as the Hungarians call it, Nagyvárad, because that's on the Romanian-Hungarian border. Romania is a very, very ethnically diverse country.
It's a wonderful country, but just when you said the Hungarian border, does that mean the new Ewtn studios are in Transylvania?
Yes, they will be in Transylvania, in the western parts of Transylvania. Yeah. And interestingly, actually, the head of Ewtn Hungary, which recently changed its name from TV Bonum to Ewtn Magyarország, is born and raised in Transylvania during
Wonderful.
the Ceausescu regime, because Transylvania has a very large ethnic Hungarian population.
That's right.
But the new station. Huh?
So soon Dracula will have his own show on EWTN.
I was counting the seconds before we started cracking Dracula jokes. I was restraining myself from saying...
Well, let's put it this way. It's not funny, okay? It's not funny. That's how you react nowadays. So, first of all, it's not funny. But second of all, Dracula was a Romanian,
yes.
The real Dracula was a Romanian
yes.
national hero who was defending Romania from the Ottoman onslaught that was attacking the Balkans for several centuries, and he was one of the bravest local landlords who fought the Ottomans back in, shall we say, the usual late medieval manner.
That's right.
But that was how things were handled during that time, and then he was adopted by Bram Stoker, and shall we say that the whole story was twisted around. So we like the real Count Dracula.
I think
the one from the
that's Vlad the Impaler, right? Ivo, Vlad the Impaler.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, so I'm afraid it's the fault of an Irishman then, who was Bram Stoker, to create the Dracula myth. But it's great. I mean, I was restraining myself from saying... I
wasn't pointing any fingers, please.
I know that. I was restraining myself from saying that I was very glad that EWTN at last had a stake in Transylvania.
Okay,
but we'll leave it at that. But in all seriousness, I mean,
it's a fantastic development.
EWTN's expansion into across Europe at the moment, whether it's in the lowlands in the north, which is a number of countries, or whether it's in that whole Central European belt of obviously Poland, but also the Czech Republic, Hungary, now Romania. Does Bulgaria, Moldova, are you expanding into the Caucasus?
Well, we'll see. We are in Ukraine, and we have been for quite a while. There is a very dynamic local EWTN in Kiev, which can be watched by people really all over the country, in probably more than 80 cities now on cable television. Well, Moldova would be hopefully a sort of a no-brainer after we are established in Romania, because Moldova is pretty much a Romanian-speaking country, which for a number of reasons is not a part of Romania.
Correct.
Although there's a mix. I was in Moldova actually a year ago. Interesting place. It's the least visited country in Europe,
really, right
after Belarus, and I strongly recommend visiting both of them for various reasons. One of them is that in a sense for the people who never saw real socialism or communism at first hand, they are the ones that preserved the scanson of communism to the best of their abilities, or the abilities of their respective then leaders. In Moldova, it has changed recently. Well, as in Belarus, maybe it will change soon. We'll see. And there is already a channel in Romania, so I think it will be just a question of time to also make it available in Moldova. Bulgaria is a different story. Interestingly, there are actually more Catholic Bulgarians living in Romania than in Bulgaria itself.
Right.
Because, as I said, Romania is probably the most ethnically and religiously diverse country in Europe. It also has a population of, for instance, the Gagauz, who are the only Turkic ethnic group who is Christian, for instance, right? So it's a fascinating place. So Bulgaria, hopefully, why not? But let's put it this way: it will be more difficult just because of simply demographic issues and the fact that the Catholic population in Bulgaria is really, really tiny. In fact, we are having now the first talks about establishing something in Albania, which has a percentage-wise much larger Catholic population, especially in the north. So hopefully Albania, which is also an incredibly interesting.
So Father Elias, what's the state of play in the lowlands at the moment? Do you have your own programming going out at the moment across those countries?
Well, yes, we have started the channel. I'm living in a place where I can do this very quietly, but it's for the moment only a personal channel. And in October, I hope to have other participants who with whom I make programs or who make their programs. I've invited a few people. It's very slow, and I'm doing it all on my own. The editing of my YouTube channel, of all the videos, I'm doing it myself, which is amusing, sometimes very tedious. It's nice to learn something new.
Yeah.
But I had to start somewhere. Yeah.
Well, can I ask you both? There's a question I often get from the United States, which is the United States, as you know, for better or for worse, I mean, it's either English or Spanish generally across the continent, leaving Quebec out of this. And it's easy to make programming for a continent where the English is the main language. But how does it work in Europe in terms of EWTN programming coming from the States or from England or wherever, when it goes into your own countries? I mean, obviously you have your indigenous programming, which is in the native languages, but do you dub? Do you do voiceover? Do you subtitle? How does it kind of work over there?
In the Dutch culture, let's say we like to learn other languages.
Yes,
and we don't like at all not hearing somebody's own voice, even if the sound of a language is very exotic, eccentric, or, we want to hear it. So we always work with subtitles.
Does that mean at the moment that American programming, English-speaking programming is going out in the lowlands on the EW? Not yet.
It's not yet.
And you don't think people have a problem with that if you have the subtitles up in Dutch? It's not a problem.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. They don't like they don't like dubbing.
Ivo, what about Poland?
Well, Poland is sort of a hybrid country in this case. So in the cinema, people expect subtitles, unless it's a children's film. So then it's dubbed.
Sure.
And then on television, people expect voiceover. So one voice reads all the dialogue and you can still hear the original language in the background. In Hungary, people expect full dubbing. So you have actually famous Hungarian actors whose voices are always used to voice a particular Hollywood actor, for instance. Yeah.
Yes.
In Sweden, it's subtitles. So it really varies from country to country and depends, I think, on the custom that was established unwittingly by the first TV stations, 50 years ago.
So I think you're right, Ivo, that, for example, in Germany, the tradition was always to dub everything. They just don't understand subtitles. Italy is the same, Spain is the same. In the UK, there's been, on television in the 60s and 70s, they used to dub, but cinema was always subtitled, unless it was a very popular film, and then they somehow dubbed it. But today, it's all subtitles, and something being dubbed is a kind of almost mocked if something's dubbed. Though I have to say, my first trip to Poland, which is now 25 years ago, I remember sitting in a hotel and the Polish television was on, and it was an episode of Little House on the Prairie, which is an American stable, great show. And I couldn't believe that somebody was sitting reading the script, the voiceover type thing for the whole thing, every single part, whether it was Laura or the mother, and it was in Polish. But it was fascinating. But it's just a different way of doing things that are acceptable, right?
And again, it makes perfect sense. I think that's the ideal way of doing that, because you're so used to this voiceover, this sort of low and not very accentuated voice.
That's it.
That in a sense, it becomes transparent and you hear the actual voices of the original actors. So I will defend our voiceover with ferocity.
I think there's benefits because, although subtitling is very popular here and in Scandinavia and obviously in Holland, but there's an element sometimes where you end up reading a film or reading a TV show rather than watching it. Do you know what I mean, Father Elias? When you're obsessed with the subtitles, and if they go too quick, it can be an absolute nightmare, right?
Mm-hmm. That too. I always find it very funny to see, let's say, American action movies with a voiceover. It's not really dubbed, it's a voiceover in Russian. Because the Russians have a completely different way of expressing themselves. First of all, there's a lot of syllables, whereas in America, they always try to reduce words to one, maybe two syllables. It's so, and the Russian words have many syllables, and also the American is very much to the point, straightforward, whereas the Russian is much more rhetoric. He uses images and sort of. It's much more bombastic, if you like. So what you get when you see those movies that have a sort of voiceover, you hear the English in the background, and then you hear somebody fighting with his own language to get the words pronounced in time, because it's going so fast. So it's absolutely crazy to hear that. I don't know if it's still fashionable in Russia, but it used to be. It's really hilarious.
But I guess, I don't know what it's like in your countries, but certainly in England, in Great Britain, there's been a spike in viewers, listeners, people accessing EWTN's programming, be it online, through apps, through traditional television stations. Because we get a lot of letters here at Walsingham where people are saying, thank you so much, you've been a lifeline. Is that your experience on the continent, that people are tuning in more, accessing more, consuming more of EWTN programming?
Absolutely. Across the board, it was the spike in late March, early April was across the board in different countries, 500%.
Really?
So
wow.
Yes, it's truly unbelievable, and of course it has sort of slowly petered out, but it's still above the level before this whole mess. So a lot of people stayed. One of the obvious reasons was that the churches were closed and people were watching the Holy Mass. I think EWTN Poland at some point was showing 5 or even 7 masses a day. Also, interestingly, when EWTN Poland started 2 years ago, it launched a 24/7 live feed of Eucharistic adoration from Niepokalanów, the basilica built by Saint Maximilian Kolbe. And people were literally saying, this is ridiculous. Why are you even doing this? Well, yes. In March, in late March, it was about 1 million views a month. Wow. Now it's probably about 25,000 unique users every day. And if you look back into history, during the Middle Ages, you would often have in churches a little strategically placed window that would allow you to look deep into the church and see the Holy Sacrament, the Holy Sacrament. So in a sense, what this is basically that medieval window. If you cannot go, you can actually turn on YouTube and have a 24-hour adoration. I know that EWTN UK is doing that as well. And I can tell you that the response that we got during, especially the month of March, April, was tremendous. Literally from all over the world, from Brazil to Singapore and everything in between, wow. From Italy, from the United Arab Emirates, from literally every place. And because when it's shown on YouTube, you can actually analyze, the different countries from which people are watching. At some point, the majority of people were not actually from Poland. They were from the US, from Brazil, Mexico, from Africa, from Asia. It was, and it still is truly a phenomenon like no other. The Sunanid became the largest adoration chapel in the world. We never expected that.
Amazing. Father Elias, as a priest, what do you make of this kind of 21st century adoration, this kind of growth? I mean, we've had it in this country, right? People love Holy Mass online, they love the Rosary online, and they really love the adoration. We had it all night going out, I mean, what do you think's behind this? Or how do you see this playing out in people's spiritual lives?
Well, it's the most simple moment of eternal presence. I mean, he is there. And he's there in a way that is maybe a bit surprising. but it's very human. That is, it's something to eat and drink, and it's a physical reality. He is there. So it's the two things. Eternity is that he is absolutely there physically, the incarnated Word. That's his eternal presence. But then the aspect of time is in the fact that it is a sacrament, that it is to be received, and the Holy Communion, and there is a consecration. Those are very important moments in time.
Yeah,
that's sort of where it's the threshold between eternity and time. And of course, when life is complicated, when there's a lot of opinions and different points of view, when there is a certain degree of chaos, which is completely new to the world of today, that is a sign of stability, of something that is absolutely immutable.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think it's one of the signs of our times that the Eucharistic adoration becomes so important. It's what people need.
Ivo, you see the proliferation of Ewtn affiliates across Europe and the growth of them, how quickly they take root. Do you see that? I mean, in the same way that adoration takes roots so quickly, do you see that kind of like, in your position, in your role, can you stand back and sort of see the sweep of the Holy Spirit going across Europe through this media, through this new media that's being used to evangelize?
Well, of course, I cannot say that I, see it, right? I can see certain things that actually happen, right? So, what is the root of it? It is for each and every any one of us to discern. But I can say, for instance, that in Croatia, we helped build the station there called Laudato TV, which is an affiliate. It's not an EWTN station, but we provide some programming and we help with different things. And it literally is changing the country. In fact, just as an anecdotal, evidence, I was driving to Croatia about a month and a half ago, and they reintroduced, border checks, and so the border guard saying, "So your passport, okay? Where are you going? To Zagreb. Why are you going to Zagreb? To visit Laudato TV. Oh, that's a good TV station." So suddenly the mood of the border guard changes, sure. and it happens in pretty much everywhere that EWTN goes in Europe, and there are incredible stories. In fact, much more powerful than this one. But I just took this one as the first one, sure. from the hat.
I'd like to share with you a letter we received here in Walsingham from somebody on the south coast of England, and they wrote and said, "Dear EWTN, I'm watching Holy Mass every day, and I'm saying the Rosary with you every day, and the Divine Mercy Chaplet with you every day. I'm not a Catholic. Do you think it's possible for me to visit a Catholic church?" And I thought to myself, that's incredible. Somebody probably on the Sky satellite has just been going through the channels, come across EWTN, and they're now glued to it. In the best part, the Holy Spirit's glued them to it, and they were asking to be put in touch with a Catholic priest. I mean, this is real time, real live evangelization happening through this media. Father Elias, what's your hope for the lowlands with EWTN? Is this your secret weapon up there?
I hope it will be, because I don't have a church yet where I can celebrate and televise Holy Mass or adoration, but I hope to have that soon. We're working on that, and it's certainly one of the things that's going to work. The difficulty with the present crisis is a little bit that there is a lot of priests and people in the church that have gone on the internet. So I'm one small fish amongst the many, and EWTN is virtually unknown in the Netherlands, so I'll have to fight my way into the market, if you like, into what is being offered. But I think as this crisis sort of fizzles out, I hope also to find a place of dialogue, but not a dialogue without purpose. I mean, with a certain sense of direction, to communicate with the people about the real questions that are now playing in society, about the risk of death, about what you entrust to science. About you see, we are a country full of tolerance. We are like the Lebanon. We have very, very many different religious viewpoints. So we have survived a few centuries in quite, I would say, a peaceful tradition within the country, based on tolerance. But the tolerance has now become a kind of cultivated indifference.
Yes. Or
I would say self-imposed indifference. So for me, it's really breaking the ice. We must be able to ask essential questions again. And I think that there's a prophetic element, or if you like, a rebellious element, where I have to show to people that by a self-imposed indifference, you're actually part of a dictatorship, which is going to destroy you.
It's interesting that you say that, because you probably couldn't get the stark contrast between the Netherlands today in terms of its secularization and its lack of religion. Is there a different challenge in Poland, Ivo, for EWTN? Because somebody might say, well, we've got Catholicism here. We're all religious. Why we don't need more television?
Certainly, we don't need more television, but we need more encouragement. We need more means of communicating, of building a real community, of evangelizing, and that's, in a sense, I was laughing that EWTN Poland was pretty much the antithesis, the anti-television. If you put a camera in a chapel and nothing happens there is only a monstrance, and maybe you can see the backs of the heads of people who come in and pray. That is not television, is it? And yet thousands of people obviously need it. So it's but of course the challenges are very similar. The pressure of the new post-Marxist ideologies that are now really suddenly picking up all over the world, is of course felt in Poland as well. And going back to your terrible attempt at a Transylvanian joke, as the Nazi ideology was pierced with a stake, right, with the Nuremberg trials, and no one sane, right, anywhere in the world would claim that, it had some positive elements. Let's try to maybe take some of the, earlier, the, Strasser brothers or something, No, okay, no, you don't do that. Okay, and that stake was never driven through the heart of the communist ideology, which also cost the lives of millions of people, and now is suddenly trying to make up on the pig and try to woo people again, and that's because the stake was never driven. There was no Nuremberg for Joseph Stalin and his buddies, and so this pressure is re-emerging in Poland now. Of course, we have been inoculated by the rather painful shot of 50 years of communism. So it's not as successful as it is in other countries across Europe, but it exists nonetheless. And the church is under tremendous pressure, and the very idea of a religion is under attack from many angles, especially by people who sort of exactly forgot what it meant to live in a nominally atheistic country. And there's plenty of work for us. Plenty.
I'm obviously we're clear about everything you say, and the challenges are not just in Poland today; they're across Europe, indeed across the world. But I'm also conscious, Ivo, that we are the 100th anniversary of the wonderful miracle of Vistula, when atheistic Soviet communism tried to obliterate Catholic Poland from the map, and was driven back with its tail between its legs thankfully, on the Feast of the Assumption, thanks to Our Lady of Czestochowa and the intercession of many Catholics across the world. So maybe there's a little kind of glimmer of historical hope there for us. What do you think?
Well, as you might know, the very first verse of the Polish national anthem is "Not yet is Poland lost." So and this yet, thank God, has lasted for centuries, and hopefully will keep on will keep on being in that moment. So, well, thank you for bringing this up. Yes, that was in fact an invasion of the new Bolshevik Russia, which was actually aimed. That was their marching orders over the dead body of Poland towards the European fire. They wanted to join forces with the communist revolution in Germany.
That's
and
right.
What would have happened, I have no idea. It would have been rather scary. And they were literally stopped at the outskirts of Warsaw. And indeed, as you said, there was a national novena. There were prayers at Jasna Góra. There was a novena to Saint Andrew Bobola, a rather unknown saint outside of Poland, who was a Jesuit martyred in the 17th century. Very interesting character, but it's a different story. I wanted to delve into that. And but indeed, that was a surprise upset victory of a country that has returned to the map of Europe only a year earlier, after 120 years of non-existence.
In light of today's problems, I mean, they look rather small compared to what you faced in the summer of 1920.
Let's put it this way. My grandfather volunteered as a 16-year-old boy, was taken prisoner by the Bolsheviks, escaped in a very dramatic way with two of his friends, and then lived to father my father. And I can tell you that I can only thank God that I never had to volunteer, never had to go through that when I was 16 or 26 for that matter. So absolutely, it's a different level. However, that was the sense good part of it, with big air quotes, was that unless you were dumb or evil, you stood for good and you fought the really bad guys, and who were not really ashamed of showing how bad they are, in terms of executions and just horrible things that Czechia were doing. If you had your eyes open, you could easily see what these guys are up to. So of course, nowadays it's a much more nuanced world, and the one, I think it was Hilaire Belloc who was calling it the new enemy. He couldn't really answer on what the nebulous new intellectual and political trends are about, but he sensed that they are about destroying the way of life and the traditional faith, and so yes, nowadays in that sense it's much more difficult. In the other sense, it's much more easier on us. We can lead our if we're about the dissolution of a lot of things and a lot of ways of life that generation thought normal.
And I think we started referencing John Paul II and Lublin. John Paul II was born, I think, in May 1920, just as the Soviets were invading. So, and I think he spoke about it. He said it was thanks to the Poles that defended their homeland that he's alive today, that he actually lived and became a Christian and so on, and gave the world everything he gave us. Father Elias, what's your sort of take on this crisis in terms of Our Lady? Where do you think the Immaculate Heart will triumph at Fatima? How do you see that playing out in this coronavirus pandemic? Do you see any Marian dimension?
Well, I'm a bit split into two in that respect, because the vision of Fatima is a great strong devotion in my life. I was converted partly by the words of Our Lady in Fatima. On the other hand, I've spent time in Russia, where the Catholic Church is very small, and also in its appearance tries to not to be accused of approaching the Orthodox Church. And when you're in Russia and you see the mentality of that people and the culture, as far as I've experienced it, the talk about the Immaculate Heart of Our Lady seems to be completely irrelevant, even on a theological level, because if you want to talk about the Immaculate Heart of Our Lady and her Immaculate Conception, and therefore also the Immaculate Eternal Conception of the Eternal Word, and therefore also of the Filioque, I mean, it's all, if you like, the Catholic core business is starting at the Filioque. Now, the Russian Orthodox Church, I have great respect for that. There's many aspects of it that fascinate me, but they're really, really, in an unjust way, agitating against the Catholic Filioque. So even on a theological and a Christian level, it seems almost totally irrelevant, and I cannot see where that is leading us and what Our Lady really has promised. Don't forget that the errors of Russia, they were at the moment the errors of Russia, but we all know that this ideology and its sort of momentum in the human intelligence actually started in the West. And that's why it's for us very hard to define this ideology, because National Socialism, Nuremberg, it's also, I mean, I think we've simplified it too much, but it is relatively simple. Whereas what we're having to confront now is more like a hydra, which is a Greek name, but it's a symbol that appears in the Apocalypse also. It's a snake with many heads, and as soon as you cut off one head, there's another that pushes at its place. And if you look at the history of the ideologies that we have to deal with now, we can see that they originate in the Soviet Union, or the establishment of the Soviet Union and the Bolshevik Party. But before that, they originated elsewhere. Yes. And I think the beast from the sea, as it's called in the Apocalypse, and the Hydra actually give me the most powerful image of the spiritual struggle that we have to fight today.
Yes, but I'm glad you mentioned the Apocalypse, because it's worth keeping in mind, really. I mean, that first of all, we have the lady with the woman with the crown of 12 stars, but somebody the other day was talking very depressively about these times we live in, and that there was this, and I said, "Have you read the Bible?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, have you read the last page?" And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "It all ends well, you know." I mean, I hope. But listen, gentlemen, we are coming to the end of our train journey.
Can I just add to that, Kevin?
Yes.
I think, having spent time in Eastern Europe, I've learned a lot of wisdom, often in very sort of dark circumstances, because I was a prison chaplain there. And I remember one man, a Lithuanian priest, I think he was, who had spent time in Siberia, said, "You know, from the beginning, we knew that this monster has lost already. Why? Because it was using so much violence to prove that it was right.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
was certainly not right, you know."
Well, the other thing is, Father Elias, I mean, Ivo has lived through part of his life through a communistic, atheistic system that pretended that God didn't exist, and it failed. You and I have lived through a secular system which 50 years ago talked about God is dead. Well, God is still alive, and some of those ideologies and those manifestations are long since not unfashionable, or shall we say they're unfashionable today in various guises. So we're coming to the end of our journey on this Euro Express, and I'm sure I don't need to remind both of you of the great G.K. Chesterton, great Englishman, great Catholic convert, who wrote the wonderful book called The Everlasting Man. And I'm sure you both know the final chapter of The Everlasting Man, because he talks about the Catholic Church being a church which is constantly dying. Its obituary is constantly being written and being written off as the end of the thing. And the trouble is that the minute people talk like that, it comes back stronger than it ever did before. And he says, because at the end of the day, we are a church, we are a faith that has a God that knows how to escape the tomb. And I would like to think that in Poland, in Holland, in England, we have, through Ewtn, helped people to escape the tomb of fear, the tomb of anxiety, the tomb of depression that this pandemic has brought. Whatever the real health concerns there are, there's all sorts of other symptoms that are coming out that are nothing to do with it. So thank you, gentlemen, for this, this roller coaster ride across Europe. I hope we will meet again at this compartment, and I hope again we can have conversation about what's happening in points east, west, and everything in between. Ivo, for you, what's your final word from Poland for the audience tonight?
Well, just to quote the book, "The gates of hell shall not prevail."
Amen. Father Elias, word from Holland for the world.
I'm a commuter on this train, so we'll meet again. But I want to be a bit more apocalyptic. I'm actually developing a little commentary on the apocalypse on my Ewtn channel. But I would like to remind people of all the prophecies about Lucifer crashing into the earth. I mean, yes. The earth will get a bit hurt, but it's the end of Lucifer.
Yes.
And the further we get, the more he is no longer free to act, he is forced to act.
That's good.
Our king is a winner.
Absolutely. He's in charge. He will get us to our destination, even on the Euro Express. Ivo Bender in Poland, Father Elias in Holland, thank you so much for your time. And it's good night. God bless from Walsingham.
God bless.
Thank you.